Welcome everybody, this is Douglas Kirk on KIRK Radio, microcast on the internet. This hour we're going to talk about a subject that's dear to a lot of us, and that's our guns. Those things that go bang bang, and generally something gets killed if you point it in the right direction. As a matter of fact, guns were made, I think, originally so they would kill something. Guns traditionally were used for hunting, and of course, as we all know, they've been used in wars and to settle disputes and altercations and things of that nature. Gun control is in the news. The last few days, people have really been talking about how President Obama and Vice President Biden have been pushing the idea that we need to control assault weapons and what they're referring to as high-capacity magazines. Now, the high-capacity magazine is just simply a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. And in some states, they've already banned those so-called high-capacity magazines. A lot of people have 22 deer rifles that hold more than 10 rounds, and so consequently those could get taken away from you. And I'm wondering, what the public thinks about that. We're going to take some calls. I guess most of the hour will be with calls. But I wanted to start off by just reading you the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. It's very simple, not very many words. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now that's pretty simple. Some people say, well, what's a well-regulated militia? Regulated back in those days did not mean rules, it meant trained, a well-trained militia. This is a group of people that knew how to shoot straight. That's what the framers of the Constitution wanted us to have, so that we could defend ourselves against tyranny. You have to remember that the reason this country was born is that the people who were living in the colonies at the time were tired of tyranny. They were tired of the King of England, and they had a revolution. They shot it out, and because the hunters in those days in the 1700s were such a good shot, they had to be, because that's how they ate. They were able to shoot the British and defeat the British, which was a powerful army. A bunch of colonists who would hit and run, guerrilla war tactics. They were able to defeat one of the largest, most successful armies on the planet at the time. And they put the Second Amendment in the Constitution, I think, because they wanted to ensure that the people would be able to throw off the chains of tyranny if they ever came back. And it was people like George Washington and Tom Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton. They were all saying that the right to bear arms is essential to the success of the small fledgling country that they had established. And if you think about it, if you go back through history, people like Adolf Hitler and Castro, Stalin, Idi Amin, all of these people picked up the guns. And what resulted when those tyrants decided to pick up the guns? Did the people live more free, or did they become more oppressed? So I think the money ought to go on the side of George Washington and Tom Jefferson. These guys knew that freedom and liberty came when people were secure. And the way you maintain your security is by hanging onto your guns. Well, right now, because of the recent school shootings, there's this huge move to get rid of the guns, at least certain guns. And, of course, when they take certain guns, then later on that leads to more guns, and pretty soon you'll look around and there won't be any guns. And, some people are in favor of that. There's an awful lot of people that think that guns are the reason that we're having problems in this country. And I did a little experiment in the studio yesterday. I came in here and I set a fully loaded revolver on the desk. And I said to everybody, don't touch the gun. And what I wanted to do is see if that gun would kill somebody. And so far, it's been about 24 hours, and that gun hasn't moved, hadn't fired one single round. It's absolutely of no danger to anybody while it's sitting there. I may just leave it there as a permanent monument to the fact that guns are not dangerous. What's dangerous are human beings. There was a little article in the news about a shooting A man apparently was tearing up a place where he lived. I guess had a fight with his girlfriend, and he had a baseball bat, and he was breaking out windows and crashing, I guess, her truck or car. I'm really not sure. The details are kind of sketchy. And he went after this guy with a baseball bat, and the man shot him and killed him. Now, I don't know that that was necessarily the best way to defuse that situation, but I wasn't there. I don't know how much danger there was. You would think if somebody's, having a psychotic episode, that it'd be nice if you could just back off, give him some space, and let the authorities come in and deal with him. Maybe they would have shot him. I don't know. But on the other hand, the man who pulled the trigger evidently feared for his life. And if somebody's coming at you with a baseball bat, they can kill you. And so the debate is whether or not should he have pulled the trigger or should he have backed up. Well, in some states, you have a duty to retreat. In other states, you can stand your ground. If somebody is coming at you, if they're on your property, if they're breaking into your house, you can kill them. Now, is that really the best way to solve our problems? I don't know. I hope that nobody ever comes after me, because I don't want to have to make that choice. I don't want to have to make that decision. And anybody that's a gun owner, that has to go through your mind whether or not you want to kill somebody that's attacking you. On the other hand, which would you rather do? Have a pistol in your hand or have 911 on the telephone? I mean, average response time for police may only be a few minutes in some areas. It may be longer in others. But that bullet, what's it going to go? 1,400 feet per second, depending on what round you're using. If it comes down to life, preserving your life, don't you have a right to do that? And what would a gun grabber say if their daughter was being raped or if their wife was being attacked? That you should call the police and wait? I don't know. It seems like if it came down to the real danger, seems like most people would want to have some kind of defense. At least the people that I know, they like the idea of having a defense. And, it can be, you can learn martial arts, you can carry mace, you can carry a club, you can carry a pistol, you can carry a shotgun. Guns are part of the formula. And yes, America is a violent society, but that's because we're a free society. Bad people do bad things. But should we disarm the good people? Should we take guns away from people that are just trying to defend themselves? And what about the hunters? There's a tremendous number of hunters in this country who go out and enjoy the sport of hunting. I'm not a hunter. I don't hunt. I've never shot anything. It's not my thing. I'm not interested in doing it. But do I respect the right of others to do that? Of course. And the people that handle the herd management of wild animals, they'll tell you that the herds have to be culled. You have to cut down on the numbers, or sometimes they'll end up starving, and it actually wears down the population. So hunting does have a benefit to the animals. Now, there's plenty of people that'll argue, well, you shouldn't be eating animals anyway. Well, that's another debate. We're not going to talk about that today. But just with those ideas, I'm going to go ahead and take some calls and see what people have to say about this current effort that we've got going on right now. Should we allow the government to start picking up our guns? So let me take a caller here. How are you doing today?
Oh, I tell you, I'm doing just terrific. I'm just totally outraged, though. Although I do agree with a lot of points you're making.
So what do you think? We ought to pick up all the guns or not?
Hell no.
Well,
I'm sorry. I mean, heck no. We don't need to pick up the guns. Come on. We really need to arm everybody.
Well, but what about this point? That when you have people that are psychologically deranged, how is that good for them to have access to guns?
Well, it's not. And how come the president has access to guns? I think he's psychologically deranged myself, and there's Vice President Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and a whole bunch of other congressmen and senators that we have, because they want to take our Second Amendment rights away from us so that we can't protect ourselves and our families and our property from them and anybody else.
Well, so you think we all have a right to have guns?
Absolutely.
And why do you think that?
I think that because If it wasn't for the fact that the founders had guns and the people that did the 1776 revolution, we'd have never had that revolution, and we'd never whipped the British, and we'd still be living under their rule.
Okay, so you're talking about the Second Amendment.
Yes, I'm talking about the Second Amendment. Had it not been for the Second Amendment, we would have had tyranny big time, earlier than what we have it now.
And you think we've got tyranny today?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
And what makes you think that?
Well, they're doing all kinds of things trying to take our Second Amendment rights from us. You know, the president signed out about 20-something executive orders of things he thought that would restrict and control guns, when the evidence shows that the more that you attempt to control something, the worse the problem will become. Just look at Washington, D.C. They have some of the strictest gun control laws on the books, yet their gun crime is higher than other places that don't have gun laws.
Well, but how does it make sense? And I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree with you, but how does it make sense to allow the public to have high-capacity magazines in rifles that have the ability? I mean, they were designed as assault rifles. That's all they are. Who needs an assault rifle when you're hunting deer?
Well, you know, this is not about hunting deer. This is about your right to be able to protect yourself from government tyranny. This has nothing to do with hunting. It has everything to do with, though, protecting your other rights and liberties that we have under our Constitution.
Like, for instance, First Amendment.
Like the First Amendment. Once you disarm a population, that population has no way to fight any tyranny that comes their way. In other words, that government then can do anything they want to. Look at England. What they've done over there.
And what have they done?
Well, they got cameras everywhere. You even possess a shotgun, you get in lots of trouble there. Go to prison, get fined.
Well, and wasn't there a guy that shot somebody with a shotgun?
Oh, yes, and he went to jail.
And he went to prison.
Yes, that's right.
And he was defending himself.
He was defending himself.
Do you remember the
correct.
name?
I don't remember the name. I read so much stuff and that I just can't keep track of how insidious these gun grabbers are becoming. In fact, one of the plans they've got under wraps, but slowly leaking out, is that they're planning on involving your local medical doctor in their attempt to restrict your ability to have a firearm.
What if you don't have a doctor?
Well, you might be okay. In fact, I wouldn't tell if he had a doctor or not, but they say they have ways to find out if you go to a doctor or not. Plus, all they got to do is come out with an edict. You know, the King Obama can sign an executive order ordering everybody to go see their doctor, especially if you got guns. They want everyone that has a gun to become certified, mentally certified, by a medical professional so that they can be certified to have that gun.
Okay, well, how is a medical professional qualified to determine whether or not a person is mentally stable?
Well, that's funny because the government's going to supply that medical professional with a list of questions to ask.
Okay.
Some of those questions will be, well, do you believe in the Second Amendment? If you answer yes, the doctor's going to check the little box that says yes. Do you believe in a man that died and then 3 days later rose from the dead? And if you say yes, he's going to check that. They're going to ask you questions like, do you believe that you can be endowed with a spirit, an unseen spirit? And if you say yes, then
they'll check
that box. And this questionnaire is designed to make you answer questions that show that you support the Constitution of the United States, that you support the First Amendment, Second Amendment, that you support your right to own firearms, that you believe in a Jesus Christ, that you're a Christian. And when they put all that together, they're going to say, you believe in non-existent things, such, you know, where's the spirit? I don't see any spirit.
Well, whose opinion is that? I mean, there's a lot of people in this country and around the world that believe in Christianity and believe in a spirit, a Holy Spirit, and they believe in Jesus Christ, and they believe in salvation. And you're telling me that they don't want those people to have guns?
That's right. Those people will be deemed to be mentally unfit.
According to who?
According to the government.
And this is something they're working on now.
This is something they're working on now. And this is the United States government. This is not the Chinese government. This is not the Mexican government. This is not the UK government or the Russian government. This is the government of the United States of America.
Now, what was not this country founded on a Christian theology?
Gee, boy, I tell you, that's the fun thing about these gun grabbers. They don't dare let the facts get in the way.
Right. I mean, it seems to me like virtually all, not all, but virtually all of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and/or the Constitution were Christians.
Well, most of them were, and those that weren't recognized that the Bible held good, sound principles, moral principles, of which people could conduct their lives in a fair way that was just and that would not infringe on anyone else's rights.
And didn't they conduct church services in the U.S. Capitol for a period of years?
They certainly did. You bet they did.
That's in the United States Capitol.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
And now that same august body is talking about limiting the rights of Christians, saying that a Christian cannot have a constitutional right to own a firearm?
That's correct. And that's how they plan on grabbing the guns from people that have guns without violating the Second Amendment.
In other words, they're going to say you're mentally deranged if you believe in a spiritual afterlife.
That's correct. Yeah,
you're
crazy.
Me. You're making this up, right?
No, I am not making this up. These are things that are beginning to come out. If you research, you can find the data of what I've been saying. It's out there. You just got to go dig for it.
Well, I'm shocked, and that's.
Well, it is shocking, and you should be shocked.
That's what all this is about. The reason that I'm trying to reach out to people and let them know what's going on, and I really appreciate your call because I hadn't heard this one, and you hear such weird stuff from time to time. It's like, what? What? I can't believe what I'm hearing. I mean, I get a kick out of this idea. Joe Biden's going around saying that high-capacity magazines are dangerous. Okay, well, what's the definition of a high-capacity magazine? Anything that holds more than 10 rounds. So a 9mm pistol typically holds 15 rounds. Does that mean all 9mm pistols now have high-capacity magazines and they're going to be outlawed?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
That's what he wants.
And the 9mm with a 15-round magazine is a gun of choice by many, many, many law enforcement officers.
Oh, but they're exempt.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. See, the law exempts, law officers and law officials. It even exempts Congress. It even exempts those in Congress that have concealed carry permits, and there are many in Congress that do. There are many in Congress that have bodyguards. Those bodyguards are exempt. The President of the United States is exempt. Anybody in federal government is exempt.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, the people in Congress, they're exempt from all the other laws that they pass for the people to follow. They don't have to adhere to those. They don't, for instance, they don't have to adhere to Obamacare. They've got their own health program.
Oh, yeah.
They've got their own retirement program. I mean, these guys make whatever salary they make when they're in office, they continue to make when they leave office. I mean, what a deal.
Oh, it is a deal. What it has become a royalty.
Right. The elected royalty.
Yeah, it's the elected royalty, and they're the kings and the queens, and some of them are a little on the queer side, too.
Now, let me ask you a question about assault rifles, AR-15s, SKS. I don't know what they can how they define an assault rifle.
Anything that looks like a military rifle.
Looks like a military rifle.
Right.
Looks like it.
Looks like it.
You're kidding me.
No,
right?
I'm not kidding you. Have you heard about the kids that have these bubble guns? These little plastic guns that shoot out
I've
bubbles?
played with them.
Okay. Do you know that schools are throwing kids out of schools if they bring one to school?
A bubble gun.
Yes, a bubble gun. I just recently saw a video clip a couple of days ago where there were some people that had these little bubble guns. They were shooting bubbles, and a police officer told the person, "If one of those bubbles touches me, I'm arresting you for assault."
A bubble.
A bubble.
A soap bubble.
A soap bubble.
I'm sorry to be laughing at this, but if you don't laugh,
funny. It's not funny because, ladies and gentlemen, they're out to get our guns. Once they have our guns, they can have you.
The reason I'm laughing is that's the only way I keep from crying. I mean, this is not the way I thought the country would go. And you look back through history, you look at people like Hitler, or any of the other great tyrants of history. The first thing they did is pick up the guns.
That's exactly what.
That's the first thing they did. And once they got control of the guns, then they had control of the population. And Mao Zedong, and you just list them. You just list them.
Every tyrant on the planet has done that.
And now it appears as though, in order to protect the children, they want to start picking up our guns. I mean, it's tragic when somebody is deranged and he goes in and he shoots up a school, or he shoots up a shopping mall, or he goes into a Luby's cafeteria. I mean, that's a shame. It's a tragedy. We all grieve over that. But that is not an excuse to disarm the population, because the minute you disarm the population, then only the criminals will have guns.
Yeah, criminals and our criminal government.
And what would you rather have on when somebody's breaking down your front door? Would you rather have a pistol in your hand or have a cop on the phone?
I'd rather have a shotgun in my hand.
I mean, it's just who's going to get there quicker? The bullet that goes at 1,400 feet per second, or the cop that takes 3 minutes?
The bullet definitely will.
I mean, and I don't know what the average response time is. In some areas, it's really, really fast.
3 to 5 minutes.
But 3 minutes is too long, because the event is over in 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes, you can kill 50 people if you have the right weapons.
Now, what do you think about allowing people to have concealed carry permits on school campus, either college or even secondary schools? What's your opinion of that?
I think that's a good idea. And I think if I was a teacher and I was employed in a school that could become a target, I'd certainly want to be armed, because I know that the cops ain't going to get there in time to protect me. Or to protect anybody else.
And I think the statistics show that if there's a armed person at the scene of a mass shooting, that fewer people die. If all the people at the mass shooting are unarmed except for the bad guy, except for the shooter, a lot more people are killed.
Yeah.
So, and that's statistically accurate. It seems to me that it would make sense to arm people in these facilities. Do it properly, give them the training, make sure that they're not mentally deranged, and I would use a proper analysis. I wouldn't be asking them whether or not they believed in God,
You're right.
But, I mean, as long as you can satisfy yourself that these people are good, stable, honest Americans, let them take their guns into the workplace, into the schoolyards, onto the college campuses. It makes sense to me that we'll have a safer environment for everybody.
Well, the questions that are not being asked, that should be asked, but they're not being asked by the government, is one, why did that person go into that school and kill 20 people? What is that person's background? What were they doing? Where had they been? Who were their doctors?
One of the interesting things that's circulating now on the internet is a team of people have researched mass shootings going back 10 or 15 years, and they're showing a high incidence of the use of antidepressants. These people that are doing the shooting are under doctor care. They're receiving Prozac, or they're receiving Xanax, or they're receiving any number of other antidepressants. Now, you can't necessarily conclude that the antidepressants cause them to start shooting, but you can certainly conclude that if a person is receiving an antidepressant, he's more likely to become a shooter.
Well, you familiar with LSD?
Absolutely.
Well, some of these drugs have a very similar chemical composition to LSD. In other words, they're a variation of LSD, and a person on LSD will hallucinate. They can do all sorts of things, and suggestions can be given to them, and they internalize that suggestion, and they go do it.
Well, and if you look at the package inserts, which the Federal Drug Administration requires the manufacturers of drugs, the pharmaceutical companies, they require them to put in every package of medicine a disclaimer. And in that disclaimer, it's always fine print. You can barely read it. You got to get out your magnifying glass, but it tells you the side effects.
Right.
And if you start reading the side effects of many, if not all, antidepressants and psychotropic drugs, the side effects are suicidal thoughts,
Yep.
depression. I mean,
Yep.
here's a person being treated for depression, and yet the
Yeah,
side effect of the drug is depression.
Not a good drug, is it?
I mean, wake up, America.
Yes,
you know,
indeed.
you think we have a problem with guns. We need to be looking at the drug culture, the legal pharmaceutical drug culture in America, because we're feeding people drugs that are causing some serious problems.
Yes, but see, they're not making that as part of the debate.
Well, I am, though.
I know you are,
I mean,
and there are others around the country that are doing it, but our own government is not making that part of the debate. In fact, they're trying to sweep that under the carpet, and they want the debate to become, well, it's for you kids. You know, we don't want somebody going in there and shooting up 20 more students next year, do you? Of course not. I don't want that to happen, no more than you do. But what I want government to do is lay off taking our guns from us and get and talk about the real issues, the causes of why someone would go into a school and shoot 20 or 30 people
in the first place. And that doesn't that appear to you that that's accelerating as time goes on? I mean, we didn't have these kinds of things in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. They're accelerating. We're getting more and more of these types of incidents. Why is that?
Well, I grew up in the 50s, 50s and 60s. And when I was a kid, I used to be able to take my cap pistols to school, and in recess, all the boys would get out and we'd play, cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians, whatever mood struck us. Later, when I got to high school, I could walk out into the parking lot, and you could find invariably cars and trucks that had shotguns, rifles, and pistols in them.
Oh, absolutely. I remember that too. That you know, in the truck, which people wouldn't even lock, would be a shotgun loaded, hanging on the rack right there in the back where you could see it. That was common. You didn't have any shootings. You didn't have any guns stolen. Now, that's probably not true all over the country, but it was certainly true in the South.
Yeah, I can't recall ever reading or hearing about some kid going out to the school parking lot, taking their gun out, and going down the hall shooting people.
Well, there were guns everywhere.
There were guns everywhere. And if a kid had done that, the other kids, they were going out to their trucks, cars, got their guns, and there would have been some more shooting.
Well, does it appear to you that now that we have gun-free zones on campuses that we have more deaths from
A gun-free zone is an invitation to say, come and shoot me up. I can't defend myself.
Now, what would you do if you were a administrator in a school and the state or the federal government is telling you, no, you can't have guns here? If you were an administrator, would you just say it's okay anyway? Let the teachers that have concealed carry permits, let them bring their guns anyway? What would you do?
If I was administrator, first off, if I had a teacher or teachers that I was responsible for, if they had a concealed carry permit, one, they better don't tell me that you got one, because I don't need to know.
Right.
In fact, if you tell somebody that you got a concealed permit to carry, you're violating the law anyway.
Okay.
So they shouldn't tell. And I could ask, but they don't have to tell me.
Right.
So I wouldn't stop a teacher from coming in that had a concealed carry.
So you wouldn't automatically fire them because they were exercising their Second Amendment right, and they went through the training classes and everything to get that permit. Now, do you think every gun owner should have a permit?
No, because if every gun owner has a permit, then the state knows where every gun owner is.
Well,
only those that won't carry it concealed need to be, they need to be trained. They need to know what they're doing with that deadly weapon, just like you need to know what you're doing when you drive your car. If you don't know what you're doing when you drive your car, that car can become a deadly weapon in itself in a heartbeat.
Well, and yeah, I think, I don't know if this is a recent statistic, but about 32,000 Americans are killed in car accidents every year. And that's with a instrument that's extremely dangerous, especially if you're intoxicated. It's extremely dangerous because you're talking 4,000 or 5,000 pounds worth of metal moving at 60 miles an hour. When you hit something, somebody's going to get hurt.
Somebody's going to die.
And we have everybody's got driver's licenses, but that doesn't make them necessarily safer drivers. On the other hand, you look at the tremendous number of miles that are traveled every year. It's a fairly safe thing to drive in a car.
Well, a lot of people that have driver's license, they did take driver's training, driver's ed, in their high school before they could get their license. So they've had some training, and if it's some that go to the military, you get additional driver's training in the military depending on what your job's going to be in the military.
Right, right. Have you ever served in the military?
Yes, I have.
So you were trained to use weapons?
Absolutely.
Are you a gun owner?
I'd rather not say.
Well, I bet you are. I bet. And now, see, that's an interesting thing. You know, people don't want to say whether or not they're gun owners, and yet the Constitution clearly guarantees.
That's because I know if I say that I do have guns, and if I can ever be identified, then they know where to come to try to get my guns.
Right, right.
Well, I guarantee you, when they come to get my gun, I'm going to give them lead first.
Okay. Well, that's your choice.
You know.
I mean, there's a tremendous number of sporting goods stores. There's a tremendous industry in America where people buy guns for the purpose of hunting. It's a giant business. And, of course, personal protection is another reason people buy guns. It's guaranteed by the Constitution. There's probably more guns in America than virtually any other country. Per capita, I don't know if that's true, but I understand about 80 million Americans are gun owners. To me, that makes it a safer country.
Well, yes, I agree with that. However, did they ever stop to think, the government, stop to think, every time that they go for a gun grab, that actually increases the number of guns that are put in circulation?
No, well, that's an interesting point. I know people right now at the gun shows are buying guns like crazy.
Well,
I mean, a gun that cost $600 last month costs $1,200 this month.
Or $2,000.
Of course, that's that's supply and demand, and you go to places where, like Walmart, the biggest retailer in the world, they sell bullets, and you go in there to try to buy ammo, and the shelves are virtually bare. I talked to a guy just the other day at a local Walmart near where I live, and just out of curiosity, how's the ammo sales? And I said, do you have any 9mm? And he says, no, you should have got here before noon. I said, what? And he said, yeah, we had a delivery this morning. He said, we get a delivery every morning, and we had 25 boxes of 50 round boxes of 9mm. He said they were sold out by noon. I said, you're kidding me. And that was just last week.
No, that's because people are afraid that the government's going to ban their guns and their ammo, and so everybody's going out and they're getting armed. So this thing with Biden, his little group that came up with a little plan, and Obama, all that's done has driven up gun sales.
Right. I mean, that's the way I look at it, because prices are up. There's a shortage of ammo. I don't know if there's a shortage of handguns and stuff. There probably are.
Yes, there is. There's a shortage of certain types of handguns.
There's a shortage of assault rifles for sure.
Yeah, they are $2,000 now if you can find them.
And what were they before? I don't know.
About $600-700.
I don't know guns really. And what do you have any idea what the government defines as an assault rifle, other than what you told me before? If it looks like military, but I mean, what guns are on that list?
The new list, I have not looked at the new list to tell you. It's available on the internet though, but it's a bunch.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
Well, gosh, I appreciate you calling in. Seemed like you got tons of information. I've got another caller here, light flashing on me. We don't screen our calls, so we don't know if it's going to be a liberal or what. I kind of wish liberals would call me, because I want to hear their side of the story as to why we need to get rid of the guns in America.
Well, most of the liberals in Congress and in the Senate have either concealed carry or they got armed bodyguards, and they don't want to give up their guns.
Well, that's like the Mayor Bloomberg thing. If people haven't seen that, that's on the internet, where this journalist was attempting to ask some questions of Mayor Bloomberg in New York City, and he was surrounded by 5 bodyguards.
I know. He asked the question, will you tell your bodyguards to give up 3 guns too? I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly.
So you've seen it. You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. and those bodyguards got physical with the guy, which was assault on him.
And I encourage everybody to go look at that, because it's pretty fascinating that here's a guy that's trying to get rid of guns, and yet he's got bodyguards, and it's just it's hypocrisy is what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Before you hang up on me, consider, why is DHS, Department of Homeland Security, why did they buy 7,000 AR-15 type weapons and 1.6 billion rounds of ammo? Why did they do that?
I wouldn't even begin to know, other than they're expecting a fight.
They're going to use it when they come around to collect guns.
So they're going to come to your door with guns
the day
to
will
get
come.
your guns.
Yes, the day is coming when they're going to come for your guns.
Now, do you believe that?
I believe that.
I know you're saying it, but do you believe
I
that in your heart?
I believe it, because they're setting up, like I say, you're going to get the medical profession involved. If you look at Obamacare, some of the gun issues were in that initially. I think some of them have been pulled out, but some of the things that were pulled out are now being reintroduced in new legislation to go after people on medical grounds against authorizing them to have a gun.
Yeah, yeah.
See, the Constitution says regulate, well-regulated militia.
Right.
And they consider that as a form of regulating. And if they can turn every gun owner in this country into a nutcase, then by regulations, they can go in there and then pull that gun out of that person's hands.
Right, right. Well, it's certainly fascinating. I've read the Constitution. I don't know that everybody's read it, but if you want to get to the Constitution and just read the first 10 amendments, they're pretty important. And
they're more than important. They are the guideposts for our form of government.
Well, exactly. And the First Amendment, I've thought of this, that the First Amendment, which talks about free speech and the fact that you can practice your religion, government's not going to establish a religion, those kinds of things. I'm sure, I don't know if this is true, but I've speculated this, that here's the framers of the Constitution. They're sitting here arguing about these amendments, and they're talking about the importance of free speech. You got to be able to communicate if you're going to stop tyranny. And somebody sitting in the back of the room probably said, well, how the hell are you going to enforce that? And I bet you money that somebody grabbed a musket that was leaning in the corner of that room and held it up there, and he said, this is how you're going to enforce it. And then somebody said, okay, well, we need that Second Amendment, because the only way you're going to protect the First Amendment is if you back it up with force or the threat of force. And that's what the Second Amendment does.
In fact, some of our founding fathers almost said exactly that. It says that to ensure your liberty, you must have the ability to ensure it, and that the Second Amendment was designed for that purpose. They were afraid of what we've got today, a government that has gone completely berserk. And if anybody needs to be certified as being mentally unstable, it's the president and on down.
There you go. Hey, I'm going to let you go. I got another caller here. I really appreciate you calling in, and stay with us. Call us again. You seem like you got a lot of information there.
Well, it's all out there on the internet. Alex Jones' website. He's got lots of information, and it's out there. All you got to do is just go look for it. And I would encourage everybody, if you don't have a gun, go get one, not two, but get as many as you can and as many as you can afford and as much ammo as you can afford. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the day's coming. You're going to wish that you had them.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, and call us again.
I will. You have a good one.
All right, bye. Okay, wow. Yeah, that guy had some things to say. I got a lot of calls here. Let me take another call. Hey, you're on the radio. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good, man. Pretty good. I've been sitting out here on the porch listening to your programming show this afternoon, and I wanted to say I really appreciate the way you're taking time to listen to the local input on this issue. I know it's a big national deal right now, but it's nice for us little people.
You're welcome. It's funny about this gun deal. It seems like every time there's a shooting in a schoolyard, the first thing they want to do is start picking up the guns. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's absolutely crazy. I mean, what are they going to do when some crazy maniac comes into one of these schools with a chainsaw?
Well,
Are they going to put the lumberjack industry out of work?
I guess we ought to start banning chainsaws.
Sure. I mean, what about that Lizzie Borden lady back in history that went crazy and chopped up her own parents with an axe?
So do you think we ought to limit the number of axes that people can own?
Oh, absolutely. And kitchen knives, all that needs to go straight on the chopping block.
So you would be in favor, if we're going to do this assault weapon ban, we need to go ahead and ban the baseball bats and the paring knives and
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, and race cars.
How about hammers? Should we take hammers off the market too?
Well, along those lines of thought, it makes you wonder, if it's illegal to drink and drive and kill somebody, why are there so many tens of thousands of people in jail for DWI, vehicular manslaughter? Even though it was against the law, it didn't stop them from going out and getting lit up and operating a vehicle and taking another person's life.
Well, now that's true. That's
so,
true.
We already have laws against that, and those laws don't seem to work because people do it every day. What's the difference going to be in a law against a gun?
Well, we already have laws against guns. That's what's funny. And even though the Constitution guarantees us a right to have guns, we still have all kinds of restrictions against guns. Who can own them and, what they can have. And now looks like Joe Biden and Barack Obama are trying to eliminate high-capacity magazines, which they're defining as, more than 10 rounds. What do you think of that?
Well, I kind of look at it from the perspective, what if you're a homeowner that is being burglarized by a gang of these young punks, Say you have 5 or 6 kids out here kicking in your doors and windows.
Okay, so in other words, more than 10 rounds might be useful at that point in time.
Well, if you're taking on 5 or 6 guys, don't you think you'd like to have a couple of rounds extra for each person, just in case?
Well, yeah, I would think so, but now here's the funny thing, if they limit it to 10-round magazines, what's to keep people from having 10 10-round magazines?
Exactly.
Just have a whole pocket full of them.
You know how these government politician people are. They're just so full of their own selves, trying to figure out ways to screw you and me, and I swear, I don't know how they sleep at night. Huh.
Well, I that's a good question. Let me ask you this on assault weapons. This is another thing they're pushing. Why should an American citizen be allowed to have an assault weapon?
Well, I think it would be awful handy in the event that the United Nations or somebody like that actually decides to come pretend they really think they want to take these guns. We don't want to be shooting at them with bolt-action .22 rifles when these guys are shooting at us with assault weapons.
Well, there you go. So, in other words, you're reading Thomas Jefferson, who said that the purpose of having the Second Amendment and the well-regulated militia
was to protect the people from the government.
Right,
yes,
exactly.
Sir. And we're supposed to be at least as well-trained and well-armed and well-equipped as they are.
Right. Now, do you remember who Bobby Kennedy was, right?
Oh, sure.
And he was assassinated. Do you know what kind of weapon was used to kill him?
I was under the impression it was just a little old bolt action, like a French millimeter sort of gun, wasn't it?
Well, you're thinking. I think you're thinking John Kennedy. I'm talking about Robert Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, John Kennedy's brother, who was shot and killed in the kitchen in the Ambassador Hotel in 1968. Do you have any idea what kind of gun was used?
Wasn't it just like a little 6-shot .22 revolver?
There you go. It had 10 rounds. It was a 10-round .22 pistol. And Bobby Kennedy was killed, and as I recall, there were 2 or 3 other people wounded. So it's pretty obvious that a .22 pistol can kill somebody and can make a change politically in this country. Why don't they just eliminate the .22s also?
I wouldn't start giving them any funny ideas, fella. They probably will. They're probably working on that right now.
Are you a hunter?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
And so you would have guns for hunting purposes?
Oh, absolutely.
And do you think that's an okay thing to do in this country, is for people to hunt animals?
Well, sure. Why not? That's a tradition. That's what our ancestors did.
Right.
What do you do if you can't afford to go to the store and buy steak every week?
Well, I guess you would hunt then, wouldn't you?
Sure.
So how are you going to hunt if you don't have guns?
Well, I guess if you couldn't afford to take care of yourself by your own means, you'd have to go to the government and apply for assistance. That's probably part of the master plan, wouldn't you suspect? Disarm them. They can't protect themselves. They can't provide for themselves. They'll have to be my slaves.
So in other words, we're the nanny state. We're creating a situation where everybody's dependent on the government.
That's the way it's starting to look, worse and worse, wouldn't you think? I'm sure plenty of other listeners will agree with you.
Well, yeah, and as a matter of fact, my phone's lighting up here. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for calling in, and we're going to take some other calls. I really appreciate everybody out there listening and calling in and participating in making this a debate.
Well, I sure appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome, and we'll talk to you another time.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Hey, this is KIRK Radio. How are you doing today? What's on your mind?
Oh, I've been listening to your program. I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
I'm just really upset about trying to take our Second Amendment rights away from us. I mean, people do not realize that once they take the guns away from us, then they have total control. I mean, Obama has done the best for the gun industry, for the economy that you could believe. I mean, I went to town the other day to buy ammunition and just to look, and some of the major outlets, one of them I was told is limiting you to one gun a week and one box of ammo.
So in other words, people are just buying it like crazy.
Well, yeah, and what's that doing? I mean, you know, he'll never take everything back that people have bought. A friend of mine said he was over at Walmart the other day, and Walmart is even limiting you to 3 boxes of ammunition.
Wow. Yeah, you know, it's funny on the Walmart deal. I stopped by a Walmart and just curiosity, looking at the shelves, and I asked them if they had any 9mm rounds, and they said, you should have been here before noon. We've already sold 25 boxes today. And I said, really? And they get a shipment every day. So, you know, they're selling them as fast as they can put them on the shelf.
Well, and there's other places I've been that they don't even have them on the shelf.
Well, they can't get them.
Yeah, and recently I seen an article, a for sale ad in the newspaper where a gentleman had an AR-15 from Smith & Wesson that I bought one last year at $600 at a Cabela store, and he wanted $3,000. So
$3,000.
$3,000. So it's just going. They say if you want it, you have to pay for it.
Of course, supply and demand. I mean, that's economics. And do you think that these prices will stay up, or will they stabilize and come down later after people are through being scared about this?
I don't think people are going to quit being scared about this. I'm afraid that what may happen is that the supply may just dry up.
So they'll quit making weapons?
Well, they won't quit making them. Another friend I talked to the other day who has somebody in the import-export business said that there was containers of ammunition and arms sitting on the ships in the port to be brought into the U.S. legally, and they aren't allowing it now.
Okay, so they're shutting it down at the borders.
They're shutting it down, the imports of this to this. They're shutting it down because they don't want any more coming in, because everything that comes in, people seems to be buying up.
Well, I wonder why. You know, the Second Amendment, which I read, I guess you heard that earlier in the program, I read the Second Amendment. That was created so that we could have a way to defend ourselves against tyranny.
And that's true, you know, and what amazes me is, like the other day I was at the local feed store picking up some feed for my animals and my livestock, and in discussing with the owner there, he come up and he says, well, I see no reason for anything above 5 rounds in a magazine. And I looked at him and I says, well, what about our right to protect us against tyranny and the Second Amendment right? I said, you know, once they take our guns away, they'll do whatever they want to do. And he says, that's bullshit. He says, I don't think you should need any more than 5 rounds. And
Okay.
I was like, wow.
Okay, so is he suggesting that we go to all of the six-shot revolvers and eliminate those? Because most guns shoot at least 6 rounds. Where does he come up with 5?
Well, I think he's a hunter and he has a hunting rifle, and maybe his hunting rifle only holds 5 rounds, so he's got it in his head. That's all you need is 5 rounds. You know, what's to say if a guy has a pocket full of 10-round magazines?
Exactly.
What's to stop him from, you know, continuing on this? I don't think this needs to be a gun control issue. I think what they're trying to push is that, but I think what they need to do is make it more of a mental health issue.
Right.
You know, there's other countries, people have gone out and killed multiple people with a samurai sword, or in Africa, and then they've killed a lot of people with machetes and things. Now, are we going to start banning that? So that, they killed, 10 people with a machete, so now you can't have a machete?
Well,
or you can't have a machete with over a 10-inch blade?
And that was the point that our previous caller was making about, hey, we need to start banning hammers and pocket knives and everything else, because all these things can kill you. And then the point that I made before that is that look at the people who have actually done mass shootings. Most of them were on some kind of antidepressant drug. So why aren't we looking at the pharmaceutical industry and eliminating the dangerous drugs that we're feeding the population? Rather than talk about guns, let's talk about the drugs that cause people to do stupid things.
Right, and like you talk about the drugs and also the mental health issue. If a person is having mental health problems, then no, they should not be able to buy a gun. A lot of these I've been reading, sometimes some of these multiple killings, there has been things before where they were talking about these kind of things, or they were preparing because they were calling old friends and doing things like that, then that needs to put up a red flag. But, the law-abiding citizen, why should you even control? It's all about control. It's all about taking our arms away from us, and so that they can do, the federal government or whoever can do whatever they want to do.
Exactly. And
it's control.
Let me ask you this. Do you see any scenario where we ought to limit the type of guns that the population is able to purchase? Like, do you see any reason that we should say no military-style assault weapons?
Well, see, I thought that's what the Constitution was about, too. Once we aren't allowed to own those, how are we able to protect ourselves from the UN or the government or anybody else who wants to take over or to control us? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I can have 30 rounds or I can have 10 rounds. You're dead.
Right.
I mean, dead is dead.
Right. If they decided to come picking up the guns, if they sent out law enforcement of some kind, knocking on doors, picking up guns in this country, what would happen? Would people turn over their guns?
I really don't think so, and I don't think that they're going to send law enforcement or our military out to do that, because our law enforcement, now you will have a few zealous ones, but those are all family. They have family. They have relatives. Same way with the law enforcement and the military. But I think what would happen is, if anything, they would send the UN troops to do it.
In other words, somebody from another country
maybe would come in and try to take our guns, especially if the UN passes the Small Arms Treaty, which the U.S. never wanted, but now I think they're on board for. No, because, hey, if my son is in the military, and if they ordered him to come and take my guns, I don't think he would do it.
Right. Well, and that's been one of the theories from day one, is that an American citizen is pretty unlikely to trample the rights of another American citizen when it comes right down to the nitty-gritty. I mean, we know that this happens every day on a minor scale, where maybe law enforcement gets out of control and they trample somebody's rights. But if we went to the United States military and said to them, go throughout the United States and pick up all the guns, I agree with you. I think there'd be a lot of American citizens, as military officers and soldiers, would say, no, that's an illegal order. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to violate the Constitution because I raised my hand swearing to uphold the Constitution.
Right. And that's what I think it would come down to. It will be, then that would happen is they would abandon the military and go back to their families with their arms, just like happens in Mexico when the Mexican military people go off and go with the drug cartels for the money and so on. That would probably happen here. They would have to bring in foreign troops to do that. And I cannot foresee. There would be a few people turning their arms, but I cannot foresee a lot of people turning in their arms. Why do you think they're buying them now in such large quantities? And why, with the economy going down the tubes, the U.S. gun market is probably better than it's ever been.
Right, right. What would you do personally? What would you do if somebody came in the middle of the night to your house and two or three guys, maybe drinking, on drugs, whatever, and they start breaking your windows and kicking your door down? What would you do?
Well, between me and the big dog, they probably wouldn't leave the property.
Okay, so, and do you feel you have a right to defend yourself in that manner?
You definitely believe I have a right to defend myself in that manner.
Why not call the police and let them do it?
I live in the country. They might show up in 30 minutes.
Okay, so in other words, your gun is going to be quicker than the official response.
Right. You say your gun, I say my guns.
Okay, well, the point is, and I think a lot of Americans believe this, my threshold on my house is sacred, and the only person that's allowed to cross that threshold is a person that I invite, and I say, hey, come on into my house. Anybody else is not allowed to cross that threshold, and I have a right to defend it. I have a right to say, no, you're not coming in. And if somebody comes banging my door down, kicking my door down, or breaking my windows, or trying to harm me and my family, I think I have a right to do something about it. And I'm sorry, I love the police. I think law enforcement is important. I think it's good that they're out there, but they can't get there fast enough.
Their basic job is to take a report afterwards.
I mean, they would. I'm sure they would love to help me out, but you know what? They can't. They can't get there. When somebody's crashing my door down or breaking my windows, that only takes him a half a second to come through that door and harm me or my family, and I can't wait for the police. I'm sorry, I just can't. I'll call them. I'll have them on 911. They can tape record the whole event. But as far as I'm concerned, I need a pistol to defend well, actually, I guess what people need is a shotgun to defend their door. And, as people have been saying, this is not all about personal defense. This is also about defending our rights as Americans against tyranny, whatever that may be.
Right. And I've already told my wife, I said, if you ever hear the front door kicked in the middle of the night, I said, you make sure you roll on the floor and you stay on the floor, and I will deal with it.
Right. So in other words, get her out of the way, and then
she's to roll on the floor, crawl in the bathroom, whatever, and I sleep with a gun beside my bed. I'm sorry. I mean, with these days and the way things are, I figure there's, I was raised, by my grandmother, and I was always taught that she was raised, she went through the Great Depression. You take care of yourself and your family.
Right. What do you think about this concept that we need to get guns off of school campuses? In other words, the gun-free zones on school campuses, which is where all the shootings are taking place.
Well, and that's a good point because, okay, Israel used to have their schools attacked all the time and their children killed. Guess what? They armed their teachers and the principals. Now it's not a gun-free zone for the criminals to come into.
Right.
I would think at this day and age, and I'm sorry because everybody's going, wow, I can't believe we need to arm our teachers and stuff. But, come on. The shootings and things, if a teacher, now it has to be controlled, has a locked box in her room with a gun or a long box with a shotgun in it. I watched the last one where a teacher said that she herded her students into the bathroom, pulled a bookcase across, and got in there and hoped that nothing would happen.
Right. Well, that's all she could do.
That's all she could do. What if she could have put her students in there, put a barricade across there, pulled her gun out, be it whatever, that she was allowed to have in school that was locked up, unlocked her lockbox, got it out, got behind her desk, took the position, and waited.
Well, she would have been defending her children.
She would have been defending the children, and it wouldn't have been a mass murder.
And how many school teachers are former military? I don't know the answer to that, but I bet you there's a pretty high number of ex-military people who are school teachers who have arms training, and all you got to do is give them weapons or let them have their own weapons. And I think they'll defend those schools really well.
Yeah, and give them training and have a set of rules and regulations so that the guns are locked up and they're accessible with a key around the neck or whatever. It's going to have to come to that. I mean, Israel eliminated their problems. They don't attack the schools now.
Right.
I mean, when you say gun-free zone, if I was a kook and wanted to go kill a lot of people, do I want to go to an area that has guns, or do I want to go to a gun-free zone?
Well, yeah, how many, that's a good point. How many mass shootings have taken place at gun shows?
It's not going to happen.
I don't think there's been one on record. I'm not aware of one where somebody and hey, at a gun show, you got all kinds of guns, all kinds of ammo, and all kinds of people, but there aren't any shootings there. Why is that?
Yeah, well, unless it's an accidental, and if there are a few of those, that's all about, accidents do happen, but right. I mean, schools, hospitals, different places, whatever, are gun-free zones, And so if I was going to attack someplace, would I attack a place that had, like you say, a gun show, or would I go to a school zone that's gun-free?
Well, there you go. And maybe we should change the sign. You see these signs that say gun-free zone. Maybe we should say defense-free.
That's basically it, because you now are basically not able to defend yourself, and this is when these type of things happen. I mean, there's been talk, I belong to the NRA, and there was talk about having armed guards in there and things, but I think that's a cost we don't need. If you have a school and even only 2 or 3 people, the principal, the vice principal, whatever, are armed, at least somebody's armed.
Well, of course, yeah, of course. And
I mean, there could be a 12-gauge shotgun in the principal's office, and as soon as he hears this going down, or she hears this, she's been trained, she takes it, she goes out. There's been places, where they shot right in front, whereas if, somebody had a weapon, they could have stopped it, period.
Right. And I think statistically, we need to look up the numbers, but I think statistically, when there's an armed person in a crowd that's being attacked by a shooter, fewer people die. Typically, the shooter dies. He'll get off a few shots and kill a few people, but then he dies. If there's somebody there that's armed, a police officer or a guy with a concealed carry permit, if the bad guy goes into a mass crowd like a movie theater and nobody's got a gun, a whole lot more people end up dying.
Yeah, I believe I've read about a church once where somebody went in there and was determined to kill a bunch of people in a church. Guess what? There was some concealed carry people in the church congregation. Well, that was stopped real quick.
Yeah, I mean, he might get off a few shots, but he's not going to kill 20 people.
Yeah, or 30 people, or however. I mean, we're not going to have these mass murders, like this. Like I say, I just don't know. I mean, our country's going down the tubes. We're losing our rights. I had a very good friend of ours, my wife and I, who was a retired history teacher. And she asked me once, she said, Bill, I want to join the NRA. And I says, why? You don't even like guns. She says, if they take our Second Amendment right, then they're going to take the rest.
There you go.
She says, history has proven it.
Well,
she said, if you follow history back, you will see.
For sure. You can list all the great tyrants of history, and the very first thing they did is remove the guns from the population. Because you can't control a population that's armed.
That's it.
You have to disarm them. And it appears as though that is the agenda here in the United States of America, is to disarm us one gun at a time.
That's it. And, people look at it and say, well, this ain't bad, like the feed store guy. I only need 5 rounds. I don't need 10 rounds. I only need this. I only need 1 round to kill a deer.
Well, maybe he's a better shot than the rest of us. I mean, if I had the choice between 1 shot and 10 shots, I think I'd rather have 10 shots.
I'd rather have 30.
Okay.
Well, what can I say? The only thing they're going to do there is once they, ban them, then the ones that are out there are just going to go up exorbitant in price. And what that's going to do is the lower income, the poor people, the government's always been good about trying to ban what they call cheap firearms.
Right.
Well, who does that hurt? The poor people.
Right.
The people who are in poverty, the people who really probably need to defend themselves from the drug dealers in their neighborhood and the burglaries and the kick the doors in and that type of thing.
Right, for sure. Well, I appreciate you calling in. I've got some other calls I need to take, and
that's fine. I just wanted to say, just keep your powder dry. I guess I better go out and fire up my hand loader and load a few more rounds.
my sentiments exactly. Well, thank you so much for calling in.
All right, you keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Boy, these callers sure are interesting. I wonder if a liberal would give me a call, because I'd like to hear from somebody that thinks it's a good idea that we pick up certain guns, or that we limit the number of rounds to 10 or less, I guess it is. Before I started the program, I went over to the gun range and I shot a weapon which I borrowed from someone, so that you could hear what a high-capacity magazine sounds like. So I'm going to play that now, and I think you'll enjoy hearing this. Okay, we're out here at the gun range. I want to show you what a almost high-capacity magazine sounds like. This is a 10-round, and we'll see what it sounds like. So there you go. Should that be banned? And what kind of gun do you think that is? That was a .22 pistol. So there you have it. That's a pistol that has a 10-round magazine in it, and that's what it sounds like. It looks to me like we're way past our time, and so we're just going to continue. One of the nice things about our internet program here is that we're not limited by time. I was just going to do an hour on this subject, but it's pretty clear that it's going to be longer than that. I still have some lights on the phone here, people wanting to call in and weigh their opinion on this. I kind of wish a liberal would call me, so if there's a liberal out there, give me a call. And don't be ashamed to call in and tell me why you should, or why we should eliminate assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. That is the move underfoot here in the United States, and I'd like for somebody to defend that. Tell me why that's a good idea. Because right now, it seems like everybody that's calling in, they're pretty much wanting us to keep the guns that we have. So give us a shout, and I'll take the next caller. You're on KIRK. You're on the program.
We're on the air?
Well, if you want to call it that, yeah, we're on the program. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I can't complain. I had some comments I wanted to make. I'm a listener out here, and I thought I'd put in my 2 cents worth, if I may.
Well, shoot.
All right. Well,
no pun intended there. Shoot,
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I'm not a gun activist. Let me begin by saying that I'm not a duck hunter. Or this is not about duck hunting. This is not about rabbit hunting. It's not about that stuff. The Second Amendment's about preventing tyranny in government. And back when I was in school, the civics classes actually taught the Constitution and explained it as the founding fathers, intended it to be.
Right.
And I'd like to say also, before we get into this thing, I'm not a member of the NRA. I'm not a gun activist. I don't go to the courthouse meetings on the steps of the capitals, and I've never been to that, gun, whatever they call it.
So you're just an American citizen.
Yeah, I'm an old guy that's seen the fabric of the United States government change drastically for the worst in my later years. I'm pushing 70 here, and I think a lot of it has to do with Congress realizing that they can vote and take from the treasures of the United States to further their own ends with social programs and so forth. And I think a fair number of our representatives, representatives and senators have become power hungry and grown financially fat on the backs of the truly working American citizens. But that's another topic for another program. But I think that this access to the wealth and this getting power hungry has a lot to do with it, what's going on. I have been very fortunate. I was a school teacher. I worked with kids. I understand how precious that is. And I also traveled the world. I was involved in electronics. I was an engineer, and one of the cardinal features of the communist regimes, like all the dictatorships, whether it's in Africa or communist China or wherever, is the prohibition of private ownership of arms. And this creates a monopoly of force in the hands of the state, not the people, but in the hands of the state. We all remember Tiananmen Square.
Well, of course,
I don't know if we all do, but
you're referring to people like Hitler and Castro and Stalin and Idi Amin and Lenin.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Hitler did it. He, they created this force in the hands of the state. Hitler did it. Mao did it. Stalin did it, and that monopoly is what we're slowly inching toward. Obama's a socialist. Our president is a socialist. I don't think you'll get much argument from either side of the aisle.
Right.
Joe Biden said, we can have capitalism and socialism, too. That's the vice president of the United States. And, of course, this was when they were putting in the Obama medical plan thing. Of course, you really can't do that. They're opposing social systems in capitalism, control of commerce is controlled by the individual and his or her initiative, and in socialism, commerce is planned and directed by the state. I've been to Russia. I've been to Germany. They're a socialist country, democratic socialist country, but they say democratic socialist, but they're pretty much a socialist country. But I've been to communist China. I've been to Russia a number of times. And I know how it works. If you talk to the people in China or Russia, you know the fear they have of their governments. They won't say it out loud in public, but if you can speak to them privately, most of them, the private citizens who are not in the Communist Party and have the elite, will spill their guts to you. Now there are some who blindly follow the party, but the majority are outsiders, and they are controlled. I remember I was in Russia at I was very fortunate, and I traveled, and I got to go to a lot of these countries and spend time there, not just go for business and be there and then leave. But I was able to have some time, and I was at what they call a magazine. It's like a grocery store, and you have to stand in line, and
right.
They only let so many people in at a time, and all the good liquor and stuff goes out the back door, and the people up front have to stand in line to get one egg and a piece of cheese or a fish, whatever it is. And this lady was standing there complaining, and it was very cold, and I had a big heavy coat on and a hat, and I guess I looked like a Russian citizen. And she turned to me and said something in Russian. My Russian is, I used to speak a little Russian, but it's all faded from me now. This was years ago, but she said something to me about, the people inside, how can they do this to us, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand in Russian to her. And she looked at me, and I don't know if she thought I was from the government or what, the police or what, but man, everybody in that line got real quiet. And, these people fear authority because they have no recourse.
Because they thought you might have been one of the government employees.
Police or, secret police or whatever
right.
The guys are called over there. And I was in Mozambique one time. We were doing some work over there, and these people are trying to desperately feed their families. I was in this one facility. It was a loading dock area, and they were offloading corn, and this guy was just one of the workers from the dock from someplace else, I guess. He had come over, and he tried to steal a bag of corn, and the soldiers, they didn't just stop him. They shot him. They just cut him down and dragged him away. Now, I did not see that physically myself, but I talked to some of the people on that ship where they were taking the corn off of. That was an American ship. And they told me that they just dragged this guy away. So they
didn't arrest him. They didn't try him. He didn't have a fair.
No.
They just executed him.
He picked up a bag of corn. They just shot him right on the spot. They didn't, they didn't arrest him and give him. There's no due process. It's just, and it's that way a lot of places.
Well, is that where we're headed here in the United States of America?
I hope it never comes to that. I'm trying to prevent violence by being on your program, by being on KIRK. I think what we have here in the United States right now is people trying to usurp power, the government trying to usurp power. The biggest employer in the United States is the United States government. And what we have is what I call a boil a frog analogy. This is something that's been around a long time. I've heard this since I was a kid. You can't throw a frog into a pot of boiling water and cook him. He's going to jump out right away. But if you put him in there and the water's nice and comfortable, and you put the heat under him, and you put him on a stove and slowly turn him up, that he's going to eventually get warm. He's eventually going to succumb to the heat, and he'll probably pass out. And you can cook him through and through. He's not going to jump out of that pot. I think that's what's happening here. They're trying to erode the freedoms of the American people a little at a time, and they're doing a good job of it. Our founding fathers were very wise in putting the Second Amendment in the Constitution. And if you read the early letters and writings of our founders, anybody that signed the Constitution, it's quite clear that their intent for the citizens of America is to be armed to prevent the government from taking control. Thomas Jefferson said, this may not be the exact quote, but this is pretty darn close. The idea is here, and this is what he said: the citizenry must be armed to prevent tyranny in government. Like I said before, this is not about rabbit hunting or deer hunting or whatever. This is not about hunting and fishing. This is about the American people being armed. Let me ask you a question. It's a hypothetical thing.
Okay.
I'm not really looking for an answer. It's pretty obvious. How could we possibly go up against the U.S. Army or United Nations soldiers if it came to that? If all we had were bolt-action rifles, how could we prevent tyranny in government?
Well, there is an answer to that, and like you say, it's an obvious answer. We need to be armed, and we had a caller earlier that was talking about the reason we need assault weapons is so that we can match the force that's applied against us.
Exactly.
And
that's the balance. That's the firearms balance of power that the Second Amendment gives us. And another important fact, sir, is if the Second Amendment falls, the very next thing that goes is the First Amendment.
Of course.
I know because I've been to a lot of these countries. You're bullied into keeping your mouth shut. If you have no recourse, what are you going to do? You're going to be like that little lady that was standing in line at the store. This might be somebody from the government. This might be the police. And if I say anything about how lousy the things are, I'm going to wind up in some gulag someplace.
So her human spirit, her human nature was to speak out against something that she saw that was wrong, but she had no way to back that up, so she shut up.
She was suppressed. She couldn't do it. She had to clam up or face the music if I was, I was dressed a little better than most of the others.
Right.
I usually tried to, blend in.
You could have easily been a member of the party, and that's probably why they all backed off. Let me ask you another question. You said you were a school teacher, and one of the things that's in this debate here is gun-free zones and the idea that, we've had so much violence on campuses, we need to get rid of certain kinds of guns so that there won't be that violence on campus. Is that a viable idea? Would that even work?
I think that what they need to do is to allow weapons on these campuses. I think there need to be armed people there. I'm not saying, at some of the schools in the area where I live, they have police that they call in. They bring the dogs through for drugs. They have police on the campus. If there's basketball game or a football game. There's a police presence there.
Well, but what about allowing the school teachers and the administrators who've taken the proper training for concealed carry permits or whatever?
I have no problem with that.
Would that make it safer?
I think it would. I would think it'd have to be done carefully. I think a way to. I think there's a lot we can do to prevent violence. I think we need to not only protect the schools and teach the people how to responsibly use firearms, but I think we need to teach the kids the responsibility of the firearms. There are sick people out there that will stop at nothing to murder. I saw a psychiatrist on one of the, I think it was ABC TV the other day. I honestly don't remember. I don't want to misquote and give credit to somebody or wrong credit or whatever. But this guy was a reputable dealer, and he had a rather learned professional opinion, which he put forward about there are sick people out there, and because we put all this in the media, these people are bent to murder. Early in life, and they're sick people, and it doesn't matter what type of gun or knife or rock or club or brick is out there. They're sick people, and they are going to try and do harm, and they create a legacy to live on after them. They know they're going to die in most of these things,
right?
Eventually, but they want to create a legacy to live on after them, and that's what they're doing by attacking the vulnerable children. When I was a kid, we had a fence around our school, we had teachers out in the halls. All the teachers weren't, working all the time. They were out walking the halls and watching things, and strangers didn't just walk into the school and take over. It's a little different now than it was then, but I think some of these things can be instituted. But we have so much violence on TV. I sat down to watch television the other night, and I've got satellite TV. I've got a bunch of channels, and I turned my television on, and everything I turned to, somebody was using a gun in a violent way, and then there was a response with a gun. The police or someone was defending themselves, and that's all we see. Let me tell you a story. I hadn't thought about this in some time, but years ago when I was younger, I used to be in real estate, and I had a lady come into my office, and this was the time when your younger listeners may not remember this, but they had CHIPS, which is California Highway Patrol.
Yeah. The television program based upon the real.
Exactly. I don't remember the exact name. I think Eric Estrada and another gentleman were the primary actors on there, and they were on motorcycles, and they were, doing their thing. And they had an episode of someone taking a rifle and going up on a hillside I hope I'm not putting this idea in anybody's head, but they had someone taking a rifle and going up on a hillside and shooting at people on the highway, shooting at cars. And it was about maybe a week or 10, and I saw that, and I thought, boy, that's really sick to put that on TV. That's weird. And just as coincidence would have it, happenstance would have it, one of my clients came in, and she said, the weirdest thing happened to me the other day. Her and her husband were going to buy a house, a nice house, and we kind of got to be, our friends with our clients. We tried to know them and know what their needs were and so forth. And we got to talking, and she said, I was driving home, and I was going to meet my husband, and I can't remember if she said she had one of her children in the car or not, but she was driving, and someone got up on a hillside, and she was driving on the expressway, and someone shot her car. She had her window up, and she had her radio on, music on, and she had her air conditioning going. And she didn't think much of it at the time, but she saw all these little dust particles fly up in her car. And she didn't think anything of it. And when she got home, I don't know if she discovered it or her husband discovered it or what, but they looked at her car door, and there was a bullet hole. And someone had shot, and that bullet went in just below her and hit the seat of her car, went through the door. Of course, the window was up. So it went through the metal of the door and went into her seat, right where she was, and puffed all that stuffing up in the car. And she didn't know what it was at the time. And so by seeing this on television, this made a copycat. Somebody went out and did this exact thing, which I saw on TV a week or so earlier. And I thought, my goodness, what a powerful influence we have, and we've got all this stuff on TV. And that was back, I guess, several decades ago.
Was that done on purpose? Somebody shot that car on purpose?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, they had to be, because she was down on the highway, and there were hills on both sides of her, so somebody had to be up there and shooting down onto the highway.
The reason I say that is because in my local area a few years ago, there was a guy driving down the road, and his window broke out, and he was shot just out of nowhere. And fortunately, it did not kill him. It was a .22 round.
Which, I think this was a .22.
Which a 22 can absolutely kill you. There's no question about that.
But I would think that would be.
What happened in that case, when they investigated it, they found that there were two boys on a nearby ranch who were just shooting, and
that could have happened.
And they allowed their round to leave their control. And it hit that motorist.
Once you pull that trigger, you can't call that thing back.
And see, I think what this alludes to is that as a gun-owning nation, we need to emphasize the concept of responsible gun ownership and train people.
When I was a child, if you broke something or did something in the store, or if you walked down the aisle and took something off the shelf, if we didn't put it back, we caught the heck for it. And I go into the stores now, and you see these kids pulling stuff off the shelves and their mothers just grab them by the hand and walk on. One, it doesn't, it tells the kids they can do whatever they want, and they're not responsible for it. And two, the parent is not responsible for their children. So I think we've seen a great shift in ethics and morals in the country. We need to teach responsibility.
So what we may be talking about here is not a gun control issue, but rather a societal issue, a question of...
I think we're talking about that with the legislatures and so forth of, our legislators, running these fantastic bills up that, our children are going to have to pay for generations, and we're going to eventually have some type of a debt collapse, and I'm quite concerned about that. This is another point, sir. I have to protect myself. I own a shotgun. I keep it in my home to protect my home and my family.
Of course.
I live in a rural area, and the police and the sheriff couldn't possibly get here in time if something serious happened. I have to protect myself, and I guess I could buy a revolver. I don't own one, but it might be nice to have. But the point is that more and more sheriffs and police departments across the country are telling the public to arm themselves to protect themselves. They say they can't get there in time, and I know the guys out here can't. They're fine people. I've talked to them. They're just too busy. They've got too much going on. They're spread too thin.
Well,
they get there afterwards, and they get to get the info from the victim if they're still alive.
And
that's raped, or their house has been broken into and they've been tied up and everything's been taken. I don't have that much, but I do have my family, and I would certainly somebody to come in my home. But the whole purpose of my call is I'm not trying to create violence by keeping people armed. I'm trying to prevent violence. I'm trying to let the people protect themselves as they should. And if a man can protect his family, I think he should. I don't want to be a coward. I hope I'm not ever faced with that situation, but I want to protect my family and myself for that matter. And on another level, even more important than that, I want to prevent violence in that the Second Amendment, if the Second Amendment gets eroded and the government or the UN Blue Helmets come in after the guns of the people, I think you will see such a terrible of violence on both sides, and I certainly hope I never live to see that day. Seriously,
right.
Someone made a joke about the Army never being able to catch or outrun or whatever it was, catch a bunch of armed rednecks and a bunch of soldiers in a deuce and a half not being able to catch a bunch of armed rednecks in a big old Cadillac. But, I hope it never comes to that. And I really think those that tried to take the public's guns away would become the redcoats, and the people would fight like our Minutemen did during the American Revolution. I really don't want to see that. I think our people would be, he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. I think we would be, sniping like our Minutemen did and so forth. I don't know, sniping is the word to use, but, taking targets that, I don't know, I'm not a military strategist, but
let me
just make one more point here while I'm thinking about it, because I think we're going to go through some real hard economic times. The government keeps printing money and things keep getting tighter and tighter. They're making the value of the dollar, the true buying power of the dollar worth less and less. Things get much tighter financially, and I think we're going to see more theft. I think we're going to see more muggings. We're going to see more home invasions. I think we're going to see more robberies. And people need to be able to protect themselves. But even more important than that, we must be able to prevent tyranny in government. That's the main point.
Right.
I don't want to see any type of revolution or dictatorship or whatever you want to call it. If we don't have the firearms balance of power, which we talked about earlier, firearms balance of power between the people and the government, we're headed for trouble. And I really don't want to fight, and even if I did, I'm way too old for that anyway. I want to prevent violence by keeping the balance of power that the Founding Fathers placed in the Constitution. I want to see that stand and not be eroded. And that's what those in power are trying to do. They're trying to erode a little by little. It's the old frog in the pot thing. And one last thing I want to say, and if you have anything you want to say, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I'm against this UN Small Arms Treaty. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah. We've had one caller talked about it. Yeah, we're aware.
Well, it's a very nebulous document if you read it that will eventually destroy the sovereignty of the United States. Others will be able to dictate to us, the United States, what we must do within our borders. It's a state to disarm the American people. They say it isn't. But if you look at it closely, you'll see that it is so general, and some parts of it can be interpreted to take the shirt right off your back without even being aware of it at first. And I urge you, your listeners, I urge you to get a copy of it or go online or wherever you can. Do a little serious exploring. To read some of this stuff. I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but I'm very concerned about all this socialism that I'm seeing in the government. I just remember, don't let the politicians destroy the firearms balance of power that the Second Amendment has created. I strongly urge everyone that hears this to contact their representatives and senators and tell them to vote against these things. If you really claim to be a responsible citizen and want what's best for our future, I would urge you to do this to prevent violence in America. And I really think and I urge the people to really think, how can I say this? Consider carefully what you may be doing if you take a contrary position on this Second Amendment. You're going to be eroding some powers that have stood for a long time. And Obama supporters now are talking about him going around the Constitution by using executive powers and around the Constitution, use executive power. Man, that's the legislature makes the law.
Right.
Our congressmen and senators are the guys that vote the laws in, and if he does that, that's just. That's crazy. That's the wrong way. That's usurping the power of the people. That's grandstanding. That's. I don't know what you call it, but it's a big mistake. And the other thing is, I don't know if any of your callers have said this, but I understand that FEMA has millions and millions and millions of rounds of a 40 caliber ammunition shell.
Right.
And I think this is, from my reading, apparently this is one of the favored calibers of police officers. And what's FEMA doing with all this stuff?
I don't know. Other than the idea that there's some kind of terrorist event or some kind of natural disaster, and they feel that they're going to need to use all those weapons and all that ammo to control
millions of rounds.
Control the public.
They didn't do that when they had the hurricane come into New Orleans. They certainly didn't do that when Sandy came on the East Coast.
I know.
I just find this a little. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Something's not quite right. Something's not quite right in this. I understand they've ordered all kinds of dehydrated food and so forth. It's just amazing. People from Sandy aren't getting this stuff. What are they doing with all this stuff?
I couldn't tell you. And that's, one of the questions that we as American citizens need to continue to ask.
Well, there's no transparency in this government. Obama said he was going to be the most transparent president. He wasn't transparent in his first term, and he certainly is far from it in his second term. We can't find out what's happened at the embassy in Benghazi.
A point that I would like to make.
I'm probably hogging time for the other listeners.
It's okay. It's okay. But one point I want to make.
Have an intelligent discussion with someone. So many times you talk about this stuff, and I don't want to get anybody's back up. I just want to express these opinions. And like I said, I'm not an NRA member or any of that stuff. Go ahead.
One of the points that should be made, I don't think anybody's mentioned so far today, is that if they get rid of all the guns, if they ban all the guns, will that stop terrorism? Will that stop violence? I mean, they're going to have to ban fertilizer too. I'll remind everybody that the Oklahoma bombing that they claim that Timothy McVeigh was responsible for killed 168 people and injured over 680 others, and he didn't use any guns. He used fertilizer and he used fuel, and he used a rental truck.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's always a brick or a knife or a rock or I heard about a guy in I won't name the big city, but a guy put a chain through a brick that had holes in it and beat a guy to death with it, and he got 25 cents off of him.
Yeah. So you don't need.
I don't know if you call that a mugging, or I guess that's a homicide. But
you don't need a gun to be a bad guy. You can be a bad guy any other way.
I think we need to. I think the key is the balance of power between the government and the people. I think that's the key issue, the Second Amendment.
And that's
I said, when the Second Amendment gets watered down, the First gets watered down. When the Second Amendment goes, the First Amendment goes.
And that's an excellent point. Now, what we end up doing is undermining the very fabric that this country is based upon when we start taking these things, like you said, boiling the frog, one at a time, one plank at a time.
They're not going to walk in next week and knock on my door and say, hey, I want your shotgun. I don't know, it could happen, but I'm not anticipating it next week, but it could eventually happen. And I'm going to say, well, what am I supposed to protect my family with? And I'll say, well, go out and get a brick and put a chain through it or something. I don't know what they're going to do, but the point is that I sound like one of these Constitution thumpers. From my reading, this seems to be the thing. I try and read the news every day, be aware of what's going on in the world, and having traveled the world so much, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Cairo, I've been to the square where all this stuff's going on and went on, and look at what the mess they've got there. Those people aren't armed, very few of them. And I was in Israel, and everybody's armed there. You see many, many guns on the street, and they do that to prevent terrorism and to prevent the bad guys. There's not that much crime compared to the United States and so forth. Terrorism is a problem there. And they're able to defend themselves. There was some guy shot a terrorist who was on a bulldozer and crashing into, I believe it was cars and a bus, killing people, killing Israelis. I guess he was, I'm sure he was a Palestinian from the news report. It's been some months since I've read that, but he was shot off of that thing, and to stop him killing more people. And matter of fact, I remember he was a worker who had a permit to come in from Gaza, as my memory serves me, and he was killing people with a bulldozer.
So maybe we should ban bulldozers too.
Yeah, I would think that'd be the next step. Well, anyhow, I think we're getting a little crazy here with that, but But the point is that the Second Amendment is there. Our founding fathers knew it. They also said that when the legislature representatives realize that they can vote stuff from the Treasury, we're in trouble, and that's what they're doing. And I mean, it's more than just the guns, but the guns are a big part of it. And once that goes, and we're not able to keep that firearms balance of power. Because you're not going to be able to go up against. I would hope the American soldiers wouldn't ever come against the American citizens, but it has happened in the past. That posse comitatus is all but done away with under President Obama. I guess it is nullified for all practical purposes. For those of you that are aware of what that is, I'm not going to take the time to go into that. But let me get out of here unless somebody else.
All right. Well,
I'm sorry. I want to put 2 cents in here. I think I put about $1.50.
Well, I appreciate the call, and I think the points you made are very valid, and certainly should be part of the debate. That's what we're trying to do here, is get people to discuss this, because it is such a serious issue, and it's going to make a huge difference if we go to sleep on this and let these things happen. We're going to wake up being dinner. We're going to be that frog.
I think we're going to be. Yeah, we're going to be frog legs. I think some good frog legs in France, by the way. I think people need to contact their representatives and their senators and make it known, and talk to their state governments as well. Not just on this issue, but on many issues, I've spoken to the people in the legislature and the Capitol here in the state where I'm at, and I would urge people to do that all over the United States, whether they're in Alaska or Hawaii or wherever. Some people are more receptive than others in the legislature, and some people take different positions on this. I got a letter today from one of my representatives, who is pretty much backing Obama on this, and I'm quite disgruntled at that. He's in line with a bunch of other things that I do agree with, that he agrees with, but on this thing we're kind of, we have opposing views, and I guess that's the way it works, but he knows my position, and I hope he takes that into account. I think if enough people call, he would do the responsible thing. I would hope he would, and vote accordingly, but anyhow, that's to be seen. I wish you the best. I thank you for allowing me to make my comments here, and I'll get off here and let some of your other listeners.
All right. Well, and we thank you for calling in. It's always good to hear from people that have thought this through and have different ideas with respect to this debate. So, yeah, thank you so much, and we'll go on.
I'll go back to my rocking chair and turn my TV back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to call.
You bet. Bye. Well, that explains it all right there. We're going to be dinner. We're going to be frog legs if we're not careful. And I don't know if people realize just how close we are to becoming frog legs. We're going to be slowly boiled here if we don't take some action to make our position known that the Second Amendment means what it means. I read it at the opening of the program, and it's very clear. It's a very simple little statement, but we need, as Americans, we need to get everybody to recognize that you start eroding our Constitution, and we're going to end up with a mess. A whole lot bigger mess than we have now. I'm going to take another call. We're kind of running out of time, but I still have a light here. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Hi. I've been listening to your program, and I thought I would call in and give my opinion about Vice President Biden's recommendations for high-capacity handguns or other types of guns. I'm totally against banning the availability of magazines that he calls high capacity, anything over 10.
Right, 10 rounds, right?
Yeah. I have a semi-automatic that has 15, and I don't consider that to be high capacity, and it was very helpful for me to have it available.
What would you use 15 rounds for?
Well, I just think it's a good idea to have plenty of ammunition available to you in case you needed more than one shot. I mean, who's going to be able to do something with one shot if you had to?
Right.
You know, got to be a really good shot to make it count first time.
That's true. So you like the idea of having more than one shot in case the first one misses.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, the ideal is not to have to use it at all. You know, it's the equalizer idea is what I like about it.
Right.
And I've had to use it as an equalizer before. I've never shot anybody or even tried to shoot anybody, but it's nice to have the assurance that if I had to, it's available.
So what did you have to do?
I had a person who was breaking into buildings on my property, and we called the police, and the police were out looking for him because nobody knew where he was. They just knew he was around still.
Right.
And I saw him when the police were out looking for him, and I had my 9mm, and so I stopped him. I told him to stop and put his hands up in the air. And it was really interesting how his attitude changed when there was that equalizer.
So when
he was a well-built, you know, not muscle-bound, but he was well-muscled young man.
Right.
And it made me feel a whole lot more comfortable having this equalizer between him and me.
So in other words, when he was staring down the barrel of that gun, it kind of altered the way he saw reality?
I would say so. I mean, he came out of the trees like, well, you know, don't worry about me. I called him out because I told him to come out, and he was coming out, and I don't know how quickly he realized when I started speaking to him that I had something in my hand, but when he saw that I meant business, he was real serious with me. He even changed his story several times when I was standing there with him about what he had been doing.
Right.
But the point was, he didn't advance after a certain point. He would not get any closer to me. I didn't have to tell him not to move. He knew not to move.
So did this guy put his hands up?
Absolutely. He had him up like in a cartoon.
So he was reaching for the sky.
Yeah. And I held him there until the police came. They finally came around. You know, I wasn't hollering for them. They came around, and when they saw that I had him more or less under control, then they took over and they cuffed him, and they finally had to tell me, okay, you can put the gun down now.
Now, did they draw their guns?
I actually don't remember. I don't think so.
So they figured you had him under control with your gun. It wasn't necessary for them to draw their guns also.
Yeah, I mean, I made sure that they saw that I wasn't pointing it their direction. Wanted them to understand that I was not making it to where they would feel like they needed to watch out for me too.
Right.
But they cuffed him, and then they said, "It's okay, you know, you can put the gun away now." And only then did I do so.
So in other words, you know, this is an example we've talked about earlier on the program where if somebody's breaking your door down, you know, it's which is better, to have a gun in your hand or to have the police on the phone. And I think most everybody agrees it's probably better to have a gun in your hand than to have the police on 911. In this case, the police were presently there, but they weren't with you. They were on the property, but they weren't with you. So
Correct.
This guy could have attacked you. Had you not had a gun, he could have attacked you, held you hostage, killed you, whatever, even with the police on the premises.
Yeah.
Now, did you feel scared when you saw this guy?
Oddly enough, no.
Well,
I say oddly enough. I really shouldn't say oddly enough. If I had not had anything with me, yeah. But the fact that I had the gun with me, no, I didn't feel scared at all.
So the reason
I wasn't shaking, my voice wasn't shaking, I was perfectly calm.
And the reason you refer to this as an equalizer is you're a woman, he's a man, you said he's muscular. I mean, in a normal situation, a man can take out a woman if it's just hand-to-hand combat, but that wasn't the case since you had the pistol, because the pistol was the equalizer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So now, if Joe Biden comes along and says you can't have that gun anymore because it has a high-capacity magazine, what are you going to tell Joe Biden?
Well, I certainly wouldn't tell him what I really think as far as where he can stick it, but I think that it's really an idiotic way to think about things. You know, as they say, guns don't kill people, people kill people.
Right.
And I'm not pointing a submachine gun at the guy.
Well, but if you had a submachine gun, wouldn't that give you more firepower? I mean, wouldn't you feel a little more secure? We had an earlier caller talk about, the fact that if 5 gang members come breaking your door down, wouldn't it be nice to have more than 2 rounds apiece? Which, makes some sense. If you're limited to 10 rounds and you got 5 gang members kicking your door down, you're kind of outnumbered.
Yeah.
And
I read a story just yesterday about a young lady, middle schooler, who was home by herself because her parents worked.
Uh-huh.
And there was a man at her door who kept banging on the door and bothering her. She called her mother, and her mother said, "Get in the closet," and apparently told her where the gun was. So the girl hid in the closet with the gun. The guy actually did come into the house, and she was on the phone to 911 and got the cops there. But before the cops could get there, the guy opened the door to the closet, and they had to take him away for a stomach wound.
Right.
You can imagine how the wound got there.
Well, I guess by magic, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and what might have happened if she hadn't had the gun with her.
Right, right. Let me ask you this question. The big debate started because the shootings, school shootings, and suddenly there's this whiplash of, hey, we need to get rid of the assault weapons, we need to get rid of the high-capacity magazines. How would you vote if you had a choice whether or not to allow people on school campuses to carry guns with proper training, people that have gun permits? Would you allow that, or would you say, no, we need to keep the campuses gun-free?
Oh, I'm absolutely in favor of allowing people who were properly trained to carry firearms on campus. Absolutely.
So that would be school teachers, administrators. What about on college campuses where, like in some states, you can carry a gun at the age of 21, and college campuses have plenty of people that are age 21 or older, so they could potentially have concealed carry permits. Would you be in favor of that as well?
Yes.
And what about high capacity? Is it okay for them to have their 15-round 9mm pistols?
Yeah, I don't consider 15 rounds to be high capacity. I think that's ludicrous.
So what do you think? Is there a number? I mean, would you say, well, I don't want a gun that has 100 rounds, or is that just a moot point?
Probably a moot point.
So in other words, let's not put a limit on the number of rounds that a person can carry.
I don't really think that a person who is trying to protect themselves from a perpetrator is necessarily going to need to have 100 rounds, but I don't think that's the point. I don't think you should place a limit on it, because I just don't think that it's right to do that.
Right. So in other words, you're not even going to give the government the opportunity to take away a piece at a time, like our previous caller talked about, putting the frog in a pot of water and boiling him. Pretty soon you end up being frog legs. So you're not in favor of any kind of restriction. Let the Second Amendment stand. Let it be what it is, and leave us alone.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your call, and I don't know that there's too many people that can call in and tell a story like that you held somebody at gunpoint while the police came over and cuffed him. But that's what gun safety or what defense is all about. You didn't have to shoot anybody, but you secured the situation. Now, are you trained? Are you ex-military, or you have any background in how to use that weapon?
Just Joe Citizen.
Joe
Jane Citizen. No, I'm not ex-military.
So in other words, as the Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia, just a trained citizen, just somebody that knows how to shoot straight.
Right.
Well, we appreciate the call. Thank you so much, and we're going to go on.
Thanks. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Well, now that's interesting. Somebody that a woman who pulled a gun out and held somebody at gunpoint without having to drill him, without having to shoot him, and the police came and put the guy in cuffs. That makes sense. You know, that's where the weapon or the threat of force, the potential of somebody being shot, defused the situation where there was no violence. And I think there's probably plenty of gun owners all across America that would endorse that as a pretty viable concept. You know, when you're a bad guy and somebody points the barrel of a gun at you and they mean business and you know they mean business, all of a sudden you don't want to be a bad guy anymore. You just kind of want to shrink into the ground. You're on the program.
Oh, thank you for taking my call.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you called in. What's on your mind?
Oh, I'll tell you that all this gun stuff that they're trying to do up there in Congress is just really staggering of what they're trying to do. Limiting magazines and controlling your guns and taking them away in some states is just horrible.
And do you think they're going to be successful with that?
Well, I sure hope not. I sure hope that people stand up for what they believe in. You know, the Second Amendment, it's a damn good amendment, and it's there for a purpose. You know, and to protect all the other amendments that are there that they're trying to squeeze out of us, like that, like our First Amendment right of freedom. You know, all the freedoms that we have. The gun is the one that protects us.
Right.
In the end.
Right. Are you a gun owner?
Yes, I am. I am a gun owner, and willing to use it if that time comes. You know, it's you hear reports about the government buying millions and millions of rounds of ammunition. What do they need all that ammunition for?
Well, I don't know. Who are they planning to use it on, I guess would be the question.
Yeah, and it's kind of frightening to think that that they could use it on us. And when you get some of these county and these police agents, these police things across the country, who's to say? Who is to say that they're going to actually not go against the people? Who's to say that a county sheriff's department is not going to stand with the government, not against the government?
Well, and if you remember what Thomas Jefferson said, the reason we had the militia, which the Second Amendment authorizes, the well-regulated militia, was so that the people could stand together against the tyranny of government.
Oh, and tyranny it is. It comes right down to it. The guns don't kill people. People kill people.
That's right. What do you think? We just have like a minute and a half left here. What do you think about gun-free zones at schools? Do you think that that's going to cut down on the violence if we take the guns away from people at schools?
Oh, man, that gun-free zone, that is an invitation. Like an invitation to these Looney Tunes to go in there with a gun because there ain't going to be no resistance. It's just horrible. Whoever thought of that gun-free zone, they should be lynched, basically, if you're thinking that. Gosh, that's crazy.
So what about high-capacity magazines? Joe Biden is saying if it holds more than 10 rounds, that it needs to be banned.
No, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Whether it's 10 rounds or 15, 20, it's still guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Right.
That you could put a gun on that counter, and that gun ain't gonna do nothing.
Well, it's funny you should say that. At the beginning of the program, I talked about putting a gun out here. It's been sitting for more than 24 hours, and it hadn't fired a single bullet yet. It's still sitting there. Everybody looks at it, and it's still there.
Not guilty.
I'm sorry?
Not guilty. That gun is not guilty of a crime.
No, and it's not going to be. I think it's going to sit there for a long time before anything happens. We've got 20 seconds, so just enough time to say thank you so much to you and all the other listeners that have called in. This has been a very enlightening program, and appreciate all your support. So we're just going to have to say adios. Talk to you another time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Well, we're about out of time, and it certainly has been an interesting discussion today. I hope that everyone will consider these things in the spirit of free expression and free exchange of ideas. That's what the First Amendment is all about. And as we said earlier, the Second Amendment was probably created in order to make sure that the First Amendment remained in place. I certainly believe that it's important that we have these discussions, that we don't just kowtow to the government when they say, oh, well, we're going to do this or do that for the benefit of you or your kids or the children in the schoolyards. We need to have a debate. We need to talk about it and determine whether or not that's what we want as a society, and whether or not that's going to, in the long run, be good for us or hurt us. And I think you can judge from the callers that the sentiment, at least the people that call into this program, the sentiment is that we need to keep our guns, that we're going to be a safer society if we have some kind of defense, personal defense, defending your threshold, defending your person, defending against tyranny. So with that, it looks like the clock is ticking out. I'm Douglas Kirk. This is KIRK Radio on the Internet. Join us again, and I really appreciate all the support. Bye now.